why Bursa Malaysia is one of the best place to put your money as opposed to outside, right? And I'm going to do a quick comparison against the US markets, right? And I know for this, I'll be going against the grain, lah, basically, right? So number one, when we look at the US markets, they have a lot of really good names like Apple and amazing phones Apple has been making. And another name would be also Google, right? Every day when we use Google, right? Or when we want to search something, we use Google as a search engine, right? So I mean, in the US, there's a lot of very big household names that many of us consumers use on a daily basis, right? Second thing about the US market is that if we were to look at a lot of, I guess, financial influencers or people within the YouTube space, right? They have been talking a lot about how the US markets has been giving quite good returns, lah, right? And they've been also talking a little bit about ETFs and also robo advisories, which actually invest in US stocks. And they also looked at a couple of this, the performance for all of these platforms, lah, right? That's the second thing, right? The third thing is when we look at the local markets, right? In the Bursa Malaysian markets, let me show you guys a particular graph, okay? So over here, this is the Bursa market, right? And I'm looking at the 5-year performance. Over here, we could see that Bursa Malaysia, it was relatively flat for the past 5 years, lah, right? And we could see that the start of 5 years, right? It was trading at the 1634 level, and right now it is 1547. In fact, if you were to invest in the KLCI, you make a loss of negative 5%. And if you were to divide it in 5 years, there'll be negative 1% per year, right? Now let us look in the US, right? So this is the NASDAQ ETF, the QQQ, right? This ETF actually invests purely in the NASDAQ markets. 5 years ago, it was trading at $190, and right now it is about $414, right? So in terms of profit, it's about 117% or 23% per annum. I mean, the returns for the US market is quite good lah, basically. And honestly, right? Let me just put it up on the... Okay. And honestly, as an investor, right, we always want to have the best returns, right? And I just showed you the equation, right? Or I showed you the chart for the Bursa Malaysian, right? For Bursa Malaysia, for the past 5 years, it has been negative 5%, and every year is negative 1% if you were to annualize it, lah, right? Whereas the US market is a positive 23%. Sorry, in terms of KLCI, not Bursa Malaysia, KLCI. So right now, why am I talking or why am I saying that the Malaysian market would be a very interesting place? Or why do I even suggest the Malaysian markets is something that we want to look at, right? So to put things down, right, these are my ground rules. Number one, the returns need to be higher than 10% for me, basically, right? And the argument over here is that if you were to look maybe during the past couple of years, right? Maybe 10 years ago, right? Roti canai back then used to be 80 cents, and right now it's about 150, right? And you can see that the prices of a lot of food items has rose quite significantly, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that when we invest, right, it's not only fine that we get a return, but what is more important is that our returns need to beat the inflation. And let me give you a particular formula. I put it down on the slides over here. Right. So over here, if our returns on investment is lower than the inflation, this is where we lose money, right? If our return on investments are lower against the inflation, we lose money. If our return on investment is the same as inflation, this is a no gain, no loss lah. What we want is we want to have very good ROIs or return on investment versus the inflation. This is where we make money lah, basically, right? So over here, let me give you an example, right? Let me just put it, oops, sorry. Let me just put it on again. One-man studio. So over here, if we were to invest in, okay, so over here, if we were to, over here an example is that if inflation is about 10%, right? What we want to do is we want to make sure that our investment gives about 15%, right? So even though there's a 10% inflation, but if our returns are 15%, right? So what will happen is that 5 extra percent is where our investments is actually growing in value. And through time, what's going to happen is that you're going to start building wealth, right? If your return on investments is much lower than inflation, say it's 3%, you invest your money in fixed deposit, right? And you get 3% versus a 10% inflation, what's going to happen is that there is a negative 7%. Every year, what's going to happen is that you're going to lose, your money is going to lose value, right? And that's one of the reasons why a lot of older people, when they put their money in FD, what's going to happen is that they put their money in FD, after maybe 20 or 30 years, right, that particular amount of money, right, is going to shrink so much in value, right? And if I can share one thing, right, and only one thing, this is the one thing I will share, is that please make sure that your return on investments are much higher than the inflation rates, right? If your return on investments are lower against the inflation, what's, like I mentioned, right? You put your money in FD versus inflation of 10%, right? What will happen is that after 20, 30 years down the road, right, that money that you saved initially is going to shrink so much in value. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of older people, they are struggling right now, basically, right? So I want to definitely change that, right? And definitely, like I said, I am a strong believer in having good returns, right? And one of the better places to get better returns for me in the next couple of months is Bursa Malaysia, right? And these are the reasons. Number one, in the US, there's going to be an election in a couple of months' time, right? So every time when there's an election, right, each candidate, they have their economic plan or their economic blueprint. Say candidate A is competing against candidate B. Candidate A is pro-technology stocks. This is an example. So candidate A is pro-technology stocks versus candidate B is not so pro-technology stocks. So every time, what's going to happen is that if candidate A maybe gets more popular in a particular place, right, or there's good news about candidate A, what's going to happen is stock prices for technology stocks will increase. But if candidate B is more and more popular, what's going to happen is stock prices for technology stocks are going to drop, right? So all in all, what I'm trying to say is that if the election is going to happen, right, there's going to be a lot of market volatility, right? And if you are investing money in these markets, right, and you don't like the volatility, you don't like seeing your stock price just going up and down, up and down, up and down, I would suggest in maybe in our local markets. So that's number one. Number two, right, why I think Malaysia is a better place to invest in is this, basically, right? If we were to look at the US right now, there's a lot of geopolitical tensions happening, right? Over in Europe and over also in the Middle East, right? And right now, as we know, that one of the players in both geopolitical conflict is this particular country right now, right? So right now, every time when there is when there's war, right, there's a lot of uncertainties, and when there's uncertainties, what's going to happen is that even the stock markets will be impacted, right? And right now, it seems to me that it's going to the geopolitical risk is getting higher and higher and higher, right? So I would rather invest in our local markets where there's no such risk, basically, right? There's no geopolitical risk, and there's no geopolitical risk, and also there's no election risk, right? I think the third reason why I prefer investing in our very own Bursa Malaysia is that we have home advantage lah. So let me explain lah. I think as many of you guys know lah, if you have been following me, right? One of the ways I actually pick stocks is by going on the ground, right? Every time when I go shopping, I would just go and see the shopping malls, right? And I'll see what shops are very popular. And every time when I see something which really catches my eye, and when I see there's a very high demand, right? Then I'll just sit in front of my PC, I'll just Google it lah. What company produces this product or what company produces that product, right? And I think if you guys have been looking at my previous episodes, I've been talking a little bit about poultry stocks, right? I think the name of the stock was CKK or CCK, right? Let me just show the particular slide for you guys. So over here, this is a CKK stock, right? You can see that at the time when I was talking about it, or when I started, when it caught my eye, was maybe about a year ago, right? And if you can see, right, CKK managed to appreciate by about 43%. Our own Bursa market actually has really, really good stocks, right? And one of the reasons why I actually invested in this stock is that once the government announced that they're going to take the price ceilings from chicken, I knew that the chicken prices would increase, right? And if chicken prices would increase, what will happen is that this company would also benefit from it, right? That's number one. Secondly, let me just switch it back. Okay, so secondly, what has happened was Hari Raya, right? When Hari Raya came, I was going through all the bazaars, right? And I was looking at the bazaars and I noticed that every other place, they were selling either ayam percik, ayam masak merah, nasi lemak, ayam golek, right? And I realized one thing, ayam is a very, very popular protein. In fact, during Hari Raya also, there is also ayam rendang and daging rendang, right? So with that, right, I knew that not only once the government take out the price ceiling, that's the first catalyst. The second catalyst is that during Hari Raya, I expect that there will be an increase in demand for these particular products, right? So right now, with Malaysia, with us being Malaysians, right, and us having the home advantage, we know what companies was going to do well and what companies will not do well, right? Why not take the advantage? Number one. Number two, like I said, our country has less geopolitical risk, right? So there's also factored in our market. And the third, like I said, there is no elections happening in our country, lah. So with that, right, that's one of the reasons why I prefer investing in Bursa Malaysia, right? So I guess to end this particular episode, I know I've been asked a lot of times, what stocks am I investing in, and how am I faring right now, right? So let me just show it to you. I know I'm just going back and forth and back and forth. So these are the stocks which I'm investing in. Let me just show you the the gains which I'm having so far. It's about 20%, right? The gains, right? And I think some of the stocks which I invested in is CKK, as I mentioned. This one actually rose by about 40% in 1 year. This is an egg player, right? Also chicken and egg, right? I'm of the assumption that both of these players would be benefiting lah. The next players which I invested is MBSB, right? If any of you guys are looking towards dividend yielding stocks, this one actually gave me about 15% last year. They paid a special dividend and I got 15% dividends. And on top of that, I'm getting some capital gains. An amazing investment. On top of that, I also invested in Maybank. I invested in Maybank during the whole pandemic, right? And at that point in time, my point of entry was relatively cheap. And right now it's giving me dividend yields of about, I think, 8 to 9%, right? So this is an amazing buy from me. I think overall, as I mentioned, or you can see that the returns are about 20%. This is excluding all the dividends, basically. So I guess all in all, right? Let me just put it back. Sorry, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay. All in all, I definitely think our very own Bursa is something where we want to look at. And in fact, I'm actually putting more my focus in local markets, right? On top of that, right? Like I said, since we have home advantage, right? why not we just take their home advantage, right? And finally, as I mentioned, if our hurdle rates, if you think inflation is about 10%, right, we want to make sure that our returns is above 10%. And over here, you can see this is actually proof that it is very possible to make money on Bursa. But the thing I want to stress over here, right, and the most important thing, it is all about stock picking. When you pick the right stocks, this will give you the alpha for your portfolio, right? And if you are wondering how to pick stocks, you can actually watch some of my previous episodes. And I'm just going to give you a clue, right, of what I said in my previous episodes. So basically, me as an analyst within the market for the past 10, 15 years already, right? One of the things which I always remember up top of my head is that every time when we invest in a stock, right, another name for stock is share, right? So when we invest in a stock, we have to remember that we are shareholders, right? And when we are shareholders for a particular company, right, we are part owner of that particular company, right? And we always have to remember that if the company does well, we as the owner of the company would also benefit from it, right? So that's one of the reasons why I always look at businesses which are expected to boom or do well within the next couple of months, right? So, and like I said, if the company does well, right? If the company makes more profit, the company's value will increase. And when the company's value will increase, the stock price would also increase. And this is where you as a shareholder would make some money. With that, I'm going to open it for questions. If there's any questions, please do ask. If not, just put it down in the comment section. I'm just going to drink real quick while waiting. Also, by the way, yeah, Selamat Raya. And I think this is my first episode after Hari Raya break. And I hope that you guys had a wonderful Raya, right? Or wonderful Raya break. I don't see that many questions. Okay, with that, I'm going to end this particular episode. And like I said, any comments, put it down in the comment section. If not, I'll see you in the next episode. Take care, guys.